This episode of the Practice of Therapy podcast is brought to you by TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com, and also by Green Oak Accounting, greenoakaccounting.com. This is the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, helping you to navigate your private practice journey. This is session number 157 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hello, folks. I'm Gordon Brewer. Hope you're having a good week or weekend whenever you might be listening to this. We're made it through Thanksgiving, and now we're into almost the middle of December, and it just is amazing how fast this year has gone by. As we get to this time of the year, it's really... as I've mentioned in the previous podcast, it's really kind of a transition time. I think for a lot of us, our schedules kind of change. We get into kind of the holiday mode and just really, I think everything centers around getting ready for Christmas and Hanukkah or the New Year and all of those things. However you might do that in your family. And this year in particular, with the COVID pandemic, just everything's changed. And so hope you're doing okay with all of that, because it's just a lot of change that has happened for us over this past year. And reflecting back over this past year, one of the things that has become really important for most all of us is really to pay attention to self-care. And that's a theme that you've heard from me over the last several episodes in different ways, and just thinking about empowering yourself and just being able to embrace change and all of those kinds of things. And in talking with my virtual assistant, Rachel, we decided that it might be a good idea to kind of go back and look at the year of some of the other episodes that we've had that were particularly focused on self-care. And we've got some wonderful people that gotten to know over this past year that have just really been just kind of stood out for us, at least as we did interviews, just thinking about self-care. So in this particular episode, we're just titling this The Best of Self-Care for 2020. Again, 2020, I think, is a year that most of us would agree we want it just to go away and let's get on to something else, because it's just been a tough year on a lot of fronts for a lot of people. So before we get to that, before we get to those interviews and kind of my introduction of the four people that we picked out, or four episodes that we picked out, I want to invite you to, if you would like to maybe work with me in this next year, one of the things that I'm doing is getting ready to plan some new focus groups. And also I get a lot of requests from people that would like to work with me individually, just to do some consulting and mentoring and coaching around practice building. But there's two ways you can go about that. One is through the focus groups, and I've had those over this past year. When the pandemic hit, things kind of changed with my schedule around that. But I do plan on starting a new focus group in January of 2021, if all goes as planned. As we all know, plans change. But anyway, if all goes as planned, I'm really starting to get applications for that. If you're interested in just being part of a small group, a small focus group, or another term for it, or mastermind groups, you can apply for that and sign up to be part of that group. It's a small group of people. I really limit it to 6 to 8 people, just so that we can have time to get to know each other and share our stories and really focus in on what it is that you're struggling with in terms of building your practice. And also just, I think one of the things about focus groups is that it gives you an opportunity to get really creative with what you're doing. And I know in one of the interview clips we have in here, we talk with Kati Morton about that and the importance of creativity in what we do. But anyway, I would like to invite you to apply for a focus group if you think that would be something that would appeal to you. And you can get to that by going to practiceoftherapy.com/focus group and fill out the application, and we'll start the conversation. So be sure and check that out. And also, if you're just interested in maybe doing some one-on-one or more intensive work with me individually, you can do that. You can also apply in the same place and we can begin the conversation. You can also, to get to that or to any of that information about focus groups or doing consulting with me, just simply go to practiceoftherapy.com, and up there in the top menu, you'll see a link there for Start Consulting, and that'll get you to those places. Also, for today's episode, I'd like to invite you to check out our sponsors. They have really been very supportive of me and the podcast over this past year, and I'm so happy to have them as sponsors for the podcast. One being Green Oak Accounting, and you can get to them by going to greenoakaccounting.com. And Julie Harris and her team are the experts when it comes to the financial side of running a private practice. That's what they specialize in, and working exclusively with private practice owners in the mental health field. And they know their stuff. And so if you'll go check them out, greenoakaccounting.com, they'll do a free consult with you to really find out what your needs are and give you some direction. So be sure and check them out, greenoakaccounting.com. The other sponsor for our podcast today is TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com, and they are the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers. They're who I use in my practice. They have a patient portal that is second to none, and they will really become the hub of your practice. They also have telehealth available through their patient portal, so you can do everything in one place. They also have the ability to file electronic claims for those of you that are insurance-based. You can do it all in one place. Scheduling, appointment reminders, all that stuff. It does everything. So be sure and check them out, therapynotes.com. And if you'll use the coupon code Gordon, just Gordon, you can get 2 months of their services for free. So in this episode, I'd like to reintroduce to you 4 people that have been on previous episodes. One is Kati Morton, and Kati has a YouTube channel. She's a bit of in my mind, a bit of a rock star when it comes to what she does. She's got one of the most popular YouTube channels on mental health care and self-care when it comes to just mental health issues. And she's been just a real ambassador for our profession and what we do. And that's episode number 118. Another person that joined me in the past was LaTonya Shelton. And LaTonya had been part of one of my focus groups. And I really have enjoyed getting to know LaTonya, and she is just one of those people that has just really got the heart for what we do. And she has really, in the episode, she really allows herself to be vulnerable and talk about how she has taken care of herself and some of the mindset things that she has overcome. And the third person we hear from is LaRonda Starling. And LaRonda, in the episode I did with LaRonda, which was episode number 131, we really jumped in deep into just thinking about self-care during times of crisis. And LaRonda put together a book really from a spiritualist perspective, but she was just a fascinating person to talk to, and she had just a lot of wisdom around this whole topic of self-care. Then finally, last but and certainly not least, is Veronica Cisneros. And Veronica was just one of those people that was just energizing and just so full of I enthusiasm is the word that comes to mind. But one of the things that I learned a great deal from her is just thinking about self-care from the standpoint of our own self-worth. And where you'll get to hear a short clip from her around that. And she was in a previous episode of, it was episode number 148. And I would invite you to go back and listen to that whole episode because it's a great one. But she has a podcast, Empowered and Unapologetic. And that is a podcast that I refer a lot of my clients to, particularly women and parents, of just thinking about your own self-worth. So I'm looking forward to hearing this little clip from Veronica in this. So without further ado, here is some of the best of 2020 around self-care. And this is Kati Morton and LaTonya Shelton and LaRonda Starling and Veronica Cisneros. I would guess for you too, one of the things that you had to kind of overcome was kind of this whole imposter syndrome kind of thing, of just really recognizing, okay, yeah, I've got some knowledge. I know about this stuff, and, being feeling quote unquote qualified to put that out there with some authority. So what was that like for you?
I mean, I'm still in it, I guess, a little bit. It kind of comes and goes. I think at the beginning, when people would come to me as like an expert, that word it didn't feel like it fit. I don't know. I feel like, and even being a creative person, as a creator, people will say like, oh, you're really creative. Like you did this thing. And I'm like, no, I'm more like science-based. I don't see myself as a creative thinker. But I went to a conference a while ago, and it was about like essentially the self-care base, but it was like we all create things, we all put things out into the world, and that makes us creative. We don't need to put these certain terms on pedestals, and that really resonated with me. And it's been something that I've been trying to believe more and let it absorb that how people see me. And if I am an expert in certain things, within especially eating disorders and self-injury. I've been working on that in a long time, for many years, and it's okay to accept that I have done that. I think I don't know if this is true, but in my experience, I feel like in society, we kind of look down on people who are confident, because confident we see as like egotistical. And it's just not the same thing. I think confidence is a healthy understanding of yourself, and I'm not an expert in everything, and I don't know everything.
Right.
But so it's still a work in progress, but I'm trying to accept the fact that, I do my best. I do a lot of research. I read a ton of books. I talk to a lot of colleagues in the space to get their insight. So I utilize all of my resources to give my viewers the most up-to-date and best information I can. And I think I'm good at my job. Yeah. I'm not perfect, but I'm doing my best.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, it's what's interesting is that you're now, as your practice, I'm going to call it a practice, and it's really more than that, with your YouTube channel and all that you're doing. I'm curious as to how you devote your time. How do you, because obviously from just watching your videos, you're doing a lot of recording, Yeah,
over the years, a lot. For a while there, I even had 3 jobs. People are always like, how'd you do it? And I'm like, I don't know. I blocked it out. I forget. A lot of scheduling. Unfortunately, I actually don't mind it. I thrive in structure, and I thrive there's a certain amount of busyness that I'm super effective at. And so over the years, it's getting better to understand what that is for me, because everyone's going to be different. Like I'm not a morning person. Like I can't start work at 7 a.m. That's never going to work for me, but I can get up and I can go to yoga, or I can do something for myself at that time. And then I can jump into my day. And so I am very scheduled, structured around how long I'm going to spend on something, what I need to do today. I've learned through tons of research, because I'm always reading something and, trying to better understand things for my viewers. And I know that we can't have to-do lists that are longer than 7 things, because that's not attainable. And one of those things on the list can't be like record 6 podcasts. That's just not,
Yeah.
it's not
Right.
feasible.
Yeah.
And so I've gotten better at structuring my days to include the things that I can complete, so that I can put checks in boxes, so I feel motivated. And I've gotten something that I struggled with a couple of years ago was just self-care, like finding time for myself. I was definitely struggling with burnout. It was when I was writing the book, and doing the videos, and it just got to be too much for me. And so I put in self-care things, and they're non-negotiable. They can't be rescheduled. I put them in my calendar just like I would anything else.
Right.
And so some of that's just helped me do it over the years. I also have an assistant that works part-time, and that's been really helpful for scheduling, email management, stuff like that. I'm not afraid to outsource things that I can't do.
Yeah. And that was one of the things I was just commenting on is that I know when I reached out to you about being on the podcast, what was impressive is you had a team of people that handled that stuff for you, which leaves you to do the creative and stuff that really is the best use of your time, which is great. Yeah.
Yeah. And it took me years this is only in the last year or two, I've slowly brought people on. I think I was scared to lose that connection, but it's really not, like, scheduling isn't something I have to be a part of, because as things get busier, it gets harder for me to make time for everything. And so if there's certain things that I don't have to be a part of, it's been really helpful. And I think everyday people can relate to that when it comes to, if you don't have time to clean your house, you can have someone come and clean it for you, or get your groceries delivered, or, wherever you live, depending on what's accessible to you. There are ways that we can order at Walmart and drive in and put it in our trunk and we drive away,
Yeah, right.
Make it more effective.
Right.
So over the years, I've added some things in like that, so that I can maximize my time.
Right. And I know one of the things that we talked about before we started recording was just the fact that one of the things that you've kind of figured out along the way is doing it kind of your own way.
Yes.
And just and the importance of self-care. So you want to say some more about that?
Sure. Doing things your own way. I'll start there and kind of weave into the self-care. It is so easy. I call myself a self-starter. It is so easy to get overwhelmed and inundated with all of the information that's out there. There's a lot of opportunity for mastermind groups such as your own, and other business coaching information out there. And it's so easy to get overwhelmed. And so to just take the pieces that you need and to simply start, just start somewhere. You're not going to get it right and perfect in the beginning, but that's the beauty of starting and moving forward on a journey. And you asked me about self-care. Boy, that is such a buzzword these days. Some of the self-care that I engage in with, it's very simple. It is enjoying a cup of coffee most mornings with my dog, walking in the park. And that probably sounds so cliche, but it really does work for me. Talking to supportive people. I call myself very internally resourced, meaning that I don't have a lot of external resources by way of people and just groups that I am actively a part of. But the resources that I do have that are around me, my mom, I have to say that. So talk with her a lot when she notices that, hey, you sound a little this way this evening. Is everything okay? And if there's something that I need to just kind of share with her, and that, I just need encouragement, and she's there to give me that. So doing the things that really get you out in nature is helpful. Breathing and talking to and being around people that really support you. That has been the crux of my self-care, in addition to all the beautifying things that we like to do.
Right. Well, I think you really strike a chord there with, you're absolutely correct. There is so much information out there now just around being able to start a private practice, how to go about it. And everybody has their own spin to it. But I think you find, like you said, and the one thing I love that you said there was you just start somewhere. And it doesn't really matter where you start. You just start somewhere, because I guess that's why I have such an affinity for LaTonya, is that we're both dreamers, and we get, and I'm always been accused of getting my head lost in the clouds. I was that kid. I was that kid in school that got called out for daydreaming too much. And so, but yeah, I think it's just finding something and just starting there. And you're exactly right, LaTonya. We'll never get it exactly right the first time, but you got to take that leap, and you got to make that jump. Yeah.
You do. And I have to, for those of you who may be listening and thinking, boy, will I ever be able to do it? And all of those kind of thoughts you may have in your mind around, I'm too old, or I don't know enough, or I know too much, or, I there's, the kind of like limited thinking. I want to encourage you to really throw that out the window. First, say thank you, because it's just trying to protect you. All right. And then you want to be able to ask it to exit left so that you can show up and do the work that you really want to do. And so I'm speaking from, that's what I had to do. So I'm equal dreamer, but I'm also a planner, love to be organized, and learning to balance that as well as be flexible has been helpful as well. So I would say, if you're listening to this podcast and you're wondering, should I go into private practice? Can I do it? Is it realistic? Can I get paneled? Can I panel myself through insurance companies? You can do any and all of that. And it's going to be scary, and there's going to be peaks and valleys, but just start. And you'll find your way. You'll meet great people like Gordon and some of the other folks that I met in the focus group, his mastermind group, that will be able to encourage you along the way.
I know one of the things that you've really addressed in your book and in other ways is just thinking about self-care. And so you want to say some more about that, just in terms of how maybe therapists neglect to take care of themselves and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. I think we do. And I think unfortunately, I think it's natural, because we are caretakers, and most of us, we got into this field because we are givers. And in being a giver, you have to sometimes take that time out to say, you know what, not right now. I'm just going to take this small time, even if it is a small time that you have to take care of yourself. And especially in private practice, because what I found is that if you work somewhere, you have people to do things for you. So you have someone to do the scheduling and to help you with billing and to greet your clients. And when you're in private practice, especially as a solo practitioner, you're all of those things. And so there is always a time when you can be doing some work. Even though I'm in my office right now, if I'm at home, I'm always thinking, what can I do to kind of make next week work a little bit smoother for me? Well, I could probably do some paperwork ahead of time, or just any number of things that you feel like you can do in terms of marketing. You can always just be doing something. And I think one of the things I learned while I was writing the book is titled Be Still, Spiritual Self-Care for Mental Health Professionals. And I think that first part is the most important part, is sometimes we just have to be still. And sometimes that means to physically be still, in terms of just not being so busy in your day and doing something that you actually want to or like to do, and like a hobby or something, because of course we like to do therapy, and also to spiritually be still. And so that's what the book is about.
Right. Yeah. So what are some of the practices that you kind of recommend that people take part in terms of that self-care? Obviously we think of things like hobbies and doing things that are fun. What are some other things that you feel like are helpful to people?
From a spiritual point of view, I think one of the first things to be aware of is who God is as a person, because that's what I write in the book. If you know who God is, if you know that God is everywhere, if you know that He's all powerful, there's a lot of things that as private practice clinicians that are actually in charge of our business, we won't take so personally, because we know that there is someone that we can go to and we can lean on. We can lean on God for those things. And then, of course, prayer. And being intentional about praying. A lot of times we don't pray until something bad happens or until we have a bad day, but just being intentional throughout the day, just to make that time to pray to God. One of the things I also talk about in the book is just being able to reflect on the good in life. There is a passage in the Bible that tells us to think about things that are good and pure. And in our world as mental health professionals, a lot of times, especially right now, it's hard to put a finger on, okay, what is good about this? There's nothing good about a virus that's going around, and in a lot of ways it's invisible because a lot of us can be asymptomatic, but then infect another person. And so if you are thinking about that, like, okay, what can I pull out of this that's actually good? Oh, I learned how to do teletherapy, which was me. I had a platform that I had to learn really quickly so that my clients could see me still, the ones that were afraid to come out. And for my students, we had to revamp one of the classes that we had for them a little bit to just tweak some things so they didn't have to have that face-to-face component. And so if you think about, what's the good in that? Well, I practice the flexibility that I teach as a clinician. And so a couple of the other things, one of the things I talked about in the book was saying no and being able to say no in a loving way, not only to other people when they ask you to do something when you feel overloaded or overwhelmed or overburdened, but also to yourself, to be able to say, I could do these extra things, but today we're not going to. And I think a lot of times right now, some of our parents who are therapists who actually are having to homeschool their kids now, and you're not able to get up in that hour and say, hey, everybody be still and get quiet and go and do your work, but they're having to do that now as stay-at-home working parents at the same time. And so I think that I've seen a lot of pictures where parents have put signs on the door that says, if this is not an emergency, give me until this time and I'll come out. And so just even having to have that boundary with their children is something that we can think about in terms of self-care right now, in terms of, I can only be a therapist right now in this moment. And of course you still are a parent. And then at the end, I do talk about what we typically think about self-care, because we still have to get enough sleep. We still have to eat enough. We still have to exercise, and we still have to take care of our bodies in a physical way, and also to surround ourselves with good people and good friends, and to be able to combine all those things with our spirituality practices.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I think it's one of the things that I'm reminded of there was a psychologist or therapist back I'm dating myself, back in the 1980s, who his name was John Bradshaw, and he wrote a book called Healing the Shame That Binds You. And one of the quotes in there that has just always stuck with me is to always remember that we're human beings, not human doings.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of times we can get caught up in just feeling like we've got to really push ourselves, like we've got to get out and strive and do all this stuff. But I think sometimes we do need to take that downtime, that Sabbath, to use that term, to be able to just care for ourselves. And I think one of the things that has happened for a lot of us, just through this season we're in with the COVID-19 and all of that, it's kind of forced us to do that to some degree. We've been forced to kind of change the way we do things, change our habits, and really, for many people, become very reflective about those things.
One thing I started to notice in my private practice working with women is that they were all suffering from the same issue. They didn't know who they were outside of all of the roles they play. They were so defined by being a mom. And although being a mom is absolutely amazing and it's this blessing, we do get lost in it. And if I take it even further, there were a lot of women who also got lost in their careers, where they would leave the house and stay at work for really long hours. And I know a lot of us therapists are guilty of this. We get validation from our clients and the progress that they're making and being a part of their journey, that they trust us. We don't necessarily get that validation when we're home and our kids are telling us, what do you know, Mom? Know? And so I've noticed that most women have a hard time figuring out who they are outside of the roles they play. And that ended up being my mission. although I still have my private practice, I developed Empowered and Unapologetic as a platform to establish a community of women who were able to go ahead and share some of these issues and say these things out loud and have this platform where they can learn skills, establish validation, and really practice mindfulness, developing this life that they want to live.
Right. Yeah, I think that is so huge, and that I think, and I think it's true for a lot of us. We get into kind of this role, and we can really kind of fill our plates too full by trying to be everything to everyone. And I think especially as parents, it's also, we tend to probably overdo when it comes to our kids sometimes. And then we feel guilty for not, thinking we're not living up to the mark. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So what sort of themes do you see with the people that you work with, and just a little bit about your approach in working with people around these issues?
A lot of us lack vulnerability, and it's interesting because we're therapists and we encourage vulnerability. However, I see that often, especially with women again. And it's this fear of being exposed. If I'm exposed, what are other women going to think? And if I'm exposed, what would this look like? What would this look like if somebody really knew my reality? If somebody really knew that I wasn't in a happy marriage? If somebody knew that I had trouble connecting? And to be honest, I found myself in that role a couple months after my daughter was born. My husband and I were 1 month away from divorce, and my entire identity, and I wasn't even aware of this. My entire identity was focused and based off of me being a wife and a mother, and that was it. I didn't know anything else. And so I ask women, when you take away those roles, who are you? And I will ask your audience the same question. Okay, so I understand you're a therapist. I understand you're a mom. But when we take out those roles, who are you? When's the last time you engaged in one of your hobbies or worked out or did something for you? Most of the time I met with, I don't know who I am. And I don't have any hobbies because I don't even know what I like. I know what my kids like. I know what my husband likes, but I don't know what I like.
Right. So how did you discover that? And it sounds like, as I hear it, it's obviously something you're very passionate about, and I can detect that. And so, how did you figure that out? What was the real you? Is maybe a way of thinking about that.
Absolutely, it was thinking about what are my current frustrations, what's currently going on, and one of them was, I want to have this routine, and I want to wake up in the morning, and I want to work out, and I want to meditate, and I want to read, and I want to do this, this, and this. And those are all of the things that I wanted to do. And I thought about, okay, well, what is the life I want to live? Well, I want to be a connected and exceptional mom. I want to be a connected and exceptional wife. Okay, what is standing in my way? What's honestly standing in my way? Because I can recite a positive affirmation. I can read a book. I can, set my alarm clock. I can do all of those things that most coaches and most people say to do. However, very few people ask, what's really standing in your way? And that required me to really, really look at myself and what I was doing, why I was doing it. And what I realized was that I didn't feel like I was deserving. My kids' school, my husband's job, my house, even my house was at a higher ranking than myself. Wow. So I couldn't do that until my house was clean. I couldn't do that until everything I needed to do for my husband was done, or everything I needed to do for my kids was done. So it really took me just looking at my life and how I wanted to change it. And that thought, that repeated over and over, that I wasn't worth it. So I started challenging it. And I started creating the perfect day, my idea of the perfect day. And if you have kids, there is no perfect day, like at all. And I asked myself throughout the day, what does this look like? Okay, so I woke up at 9 and I wanted to wake up at 6, because it's the weekend. Give yourself grace. Okay, so I want to, do I really want to wash those dishes, or do I really want to just jump in the pool? And so I jumped in the pool, and each time started giving myself permission to go out and do the things I wanted to do. And it left me vulnerable. However, at the same time, it empowered me. Mm-hmm. Hence the name Empowered and Unapologetic, because I started to live my life unapologetically, if that makes sense.
Well, folks, I hope that this has been a bit of an inspiration for you and just really thinking about your own self-care. Again, special thanks to Kati Morton, LaTonya Shelton, and LaRonda Starling, and Veronica Cisneros for being on the podcast this year and for sharing parts of their lives and what they do. I just feel so fortunate to be able to have the conversations that I do with just lots of people over the year. And they've been not only supportive of the podcast, but also just been a big help to me personally. It's been a tough year, but anyway, I hope that you find this helpful, and hopefully you'll think about your own self-care. One of the things as therapists and counselors, we know this stuff. I mean, I know, as they say, I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, as they call it, old Southern saying, but I think a lot of times we can neglect our own self-care because we are so focused on helping others and trying to do good clinical work and being at the top of our game. And then you've got on top of that just life in general. A lot of us have just had a tough year just dealing with the COVID pandemic, with trying to be parents, being able to do the homeschooling thing, all of those things. Being separated from our support systems, all of those things have made an impact on us this year. And so it's important to remember to take care of yourself. It's one of the metaphors I use with clients is, back when we could fly, remember those days? When we could fly, whenever you would get on a plane, one of the first things they would do is the safety routine. And they talk about the cabin losing pressure and the oxygen mask coming down. And the thing that they tell you to do is to put your own oxygen mask on first before you try to help anyone else. And so the cabin has lost pressure this year. So folks, put your oxygen mask on and take care of yourself, because you're doing important and noble work with what you do day in and day out. So just remember all of that. Again, as a reminder, take a look at our sponsors for today's podcast, Green Oak Accounting at greenoakaccounting.com, and they'll do a free consult with you to find out what your financial needs are. They are the experts when it comes to private practice, whether you've got a group practice or in solo practice around running a private practice. That's all they do is work with mental health providers and counselors and therapists to help them be on the top of their game financially with their practices. Also, be sure and check out TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com. They are the leading electronic health record system for private practices and mental health providers. They're who I use in my practice. So be sure and check them out, therapynotes.com, and use the coupon code or the promo code Gordon, just GORDON, and you can get 2 months of their services for free. And also be sure, if you're thinking about wanting to really kind of up your game this next year and really want to get some support and coaching and mentoring, be sure and check out the links on practiceoftherapy.com. Go over to the menu button that just says Start Consulting, and you can get links there for not only the focus groups that I'm going to be starting this year, but also to do individual consulting or work with me one-on-one intensively. So you can go check that out, practiceoftherapy.com. And the focus group link is practiceoftherapy.com/focus group. And you can fill out the online application, and that'll begin our conversation. So take care, folks. Have a great rest of your week or weekend whenever you might be listening to this. And be sure and take time to subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it, whether it be on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible now, all of those kind of great places. Be sure and subscribe to the podcast. It just helps boost our ratings. And also give us a review and give us a ranking. Or, most of them have the little star you can click on. And so I really appreciate those 5 stars. But to be honest, do what you feel led to do. So, but anyway, take care, folks. And thank you for joining me for the podcast. Been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free private practice startup guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.